The road to Blackwood Manor was less a road and more a suggestion. A faint scar of gravel twisting deeper into the Pacific Northwest's relentless embrace. Rain, a steady, chilling drizzle, had been my companion for the last 50 miles, blurring the towering firs into an impenetrable dark green wall. Each turn pulled me further from the world I knew, which frankly was the point. Blackwood was meant to be an escape, a vast, isolated expanse where the hollow ache in my chest might finally find room to breathe. My great-aunt Alara, bless her reclusive soul, had left me everything. A strange inheritance from an even stranger woman I'd met only a handful of times, mostly through faded photographs. A botanist, they'd said, with a garden that was her entire world. Well, that world now was mine. The iron gates, rusted and overgrown with thick, tenacious ivy, loomed suddenly out of the mist. They groaned on ancient hinges as I pushed them open, the sound a low, metallic sigh that seemed to echo the very landscape. Beyond them, a winding drive, choked with moss and fallen branches, led through what could only be described as a primeval forest. The trees here weren't merely tall, they were monumental, their boughs dripping with water, creating a perpetual twilight even in the middle of the afternoon. Then, through a sudden break in the canopy, it appeared. Blackwood Manor. Chimneys, crusted with lichen, pointed skeletal fingers at the leaden sky. A sprawling, asymmetrical beast, it seemed to have grown organically from the very earth, rather than being built upon it. This place was magnificent, terrifying, and utterly mine. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else. Something subtly sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. The front door, a colossal slab of oak studded with iron, offered little resistance. It swung inward with a drawn-out groan, revealing a cavernous entryway. The house felt vast. More than just large, it felt like an organism, its ancient timbers creaking, settling, almost breathing. It was a place designed for secrets, for quiet obsessions. Alara's presence, though long gone, still clung to every surface. A faint botanical perfume mixed with the must of generations. I started my exploration in the main hall, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud on the polished but scuffed floorboards. To my right, a drawing room, its furniture draped in ghostly white sheets, hinted at former elegance. To my left, a dining room, equally shrouded. But it was the conservatory at the back that truly drew my attention. As I approached, the air grew noticeably warmer, humid, and the cloying sweetness intensified. Pushing open a heavy glass-paned door, I stepped into a jungle. Tropical plants, impossibly lush and vibrant, clawed their way up trellises, spilled from enormous terracotta pots, and even seemed to sprout directly from cracks in the stone floor. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Leaves of deepest indigo, blossoms that pulsed with an internal phosphorescent glow, tendrils that snaked across the ceiling like living wires. This was Alara's domain, her life's work, and it was glorious and disturbing in equal measure. A thick, fleshy vine studded with small, pulsating sacs brushed against my arm as I moved deeper. I instinctively recoiled, a shiver tracing its way up my spine. It felt alive. Too alive. There was a low, rhythmic hum emanating from the heart of the conservatory, a sound that resonated not in my ears but in my bones. Venturing further into the house, I found a library overflowing with leather-bound volumes, many on obscure botanical subjects, and a study filled with dried specimens pressed between glass, their forms strangely distorted, alien. Ilara's world was slowly unfurling before me, each discovery adding another layer to the enigma of her life. She hadn't just been a botanist. She'd been a collector of the bizarre, a cultivator of the uncanny. A sudden, violent gust of wind rattled the old window panes, and I walked over to one, peering out into the deepening gloom. Beyond the tangled mass of Alara's garden, past the skeletal remains of what might have once been an orchard, I saw it. Rising from the dense, storm-whipped trees, its stone crumbling and its wooden platform long gone, stood a decrepit guard tower in a storm. Lightning, a jagged white vein, briefly illuminated its ruinous silhouette against the bruised sky. It was a stark, menacing sentinel, a forgotten watchman overseeing a forgotten realm. The wind howled around it, a mournful, hungry sound, and I swore I could feel the vibrations of its fury even through the thick walls of the manor. The entire estate seemed to brace itself against the onslaught, a living thing hunkering down, its roots gripping the earth, its ancient heart beating in the humid air of the conservatory. This wasn't just a house, it was a trap, and I, Blake, had just walked right into it. My old pickup, groaning under the weight of my meager possessions, finally broke through the tree line, revealing a sight that stole the breath from my lungs. Blackwood Manor didn't just appear, it materialized, a hulking silhouette against the bruised sky, its gables and turrets like jagged teeth. A sprawling Gothic monstrosity, it seemed less built than grown from the very rock it stood upon. The driveway, choked with weeds, curved past what must have once been an imposing gatehouse, now a crumbling ruin. A shiver, colder than the rain outside, traced its way down my spine. This wasn't just a house. It was an entire forgotten world. The house loomed, silent and watchful. My great-aunt Alara had spent her last years in this desolate grandeur, and now it was mine. A fresh start, I told myself, a place to bury the past. But looking at Blackwood Manor, I felt less like an owner and more like an intruder. The air inside was thick, cloying, smelling of dust, mildew, and something else. Something vaguely organic, like forgotten earth or decaying flowers. I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam cutting a trembling path through the gloom, illuminating swirling motes of dust dancing in the stale air. My first task was to find a working light switch, or at least a window that wasn't completely caked in grime. I chose a small sitting room off the main hall, pushing aside a heavy velvet curtain that crumbled slightly at my touch. Pale light bled into the room, revealing shrouded furniture, a grand piano draped in white, and a fireplace choked with soot. It was indistinct, like wind sighing through ancient leaves, but there was no open window. I paused, straining to hear it again, but the sound had vanished, replaced only by the rhythmic drip of rain from the eaves outside. Just the house settling, I told myself, a relic protesting its sudden awakening. But the house didn't just settle. As the afternoon wore on, and I managed to clear a path to the kitchen and rudimentary bedroom, the occurrences grew more insistent. A floorboard creaked in the hall above me, heavy and deliberate, when I knew I was alone on the ground floor. Once, while trying to pry open a stubborn window in the kitchen, I caught a fleeting glimpse of movement in the reflection of the glass. A tall, attenuated figure in the doorway behind me. I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing. It pulled me, subtly, towards the back of the house. I pushed open a heavy, unlatched door, revealing a corridor lined with tall, narrow windows, all choked with overgrown vines. The air here was noticeably warmer, thicker with humidity, and the scent intensified, almost sickly sweet now with an undercurrent of something metallic like old blood. The corridor opened into a vast glass-domed structure, a conservatory of immense proportions. My flashlight beam cut through the dimness, revealing a riot of verdant growth. This was Alara's domain, her famed botanic gardens. But this wasn't just overgrown. It was a jungle. The air thrummed with the buzz of unseen insects and the drip of condensation from the glass ceiling. It was beautiful, yes, but profoundly unsettling. The plants seemed to writhe, their tendrils swaying even in the absence of a breeze. Some of the vines had grown into the very structure of the conservatory, snaking through cracks in the glass, their roots visibly splitting stone. They were too numerous, too overlapping, to discern individual words. But the sheer volume was overwhelming. a soft, sibilant chorus that raised gooseflesh on my arms. As the light passed over it, I could have sworn one of the leaves slowly, almost imperceptibly folded inward as if recoiling from my gaze. This wasn't just a garden. Alara hadn't just been tending plants, and I, Blake, was standing right in its root system. The manor itself loomed out of the mist like a gothic leviathan. 2 days. 2 days since I'd arrived, and the unease had only thickened. I told myself it was the isolation, the sheer, oppressive silence broken only by the wind and the incessant rain. But it was more than that. Today, I was determined to find some answers. My boots crunched on the gravel path as I made my way toward the conservatory. It was a sprawling glass structure attached to the main house, a riot of green visible even through the rain-streaked panes. Ilara's jungle, I thought, steeling myself. The air inside was thick, heavy with humidity and the cloying sweetness of unfamiliar blooms. It was a shock to the system, a tropical haven carved into the heart of the Northwest. Plants I couldn't name clawed for space, their leaves glistening with moisture. I moved deeper into the conservatory, my senses overwhelmed by the sheer variety of life. It was beautiful, yes, but also unsettling. There was something unnatural about the way these plants thrived so far from their native lands, as if they were being encouraged. A flash of movement caught my eye. A bird, small and iridescent, flitted between the leaves, its song a sharp, alien melody. I watched it disappear, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. Then I saw it. A small wooden door, tucked away behind a curtain of flowering vines. I hadn't noticed it before. It was old, the wood warped and cracked, but strangely solid. I reached out, my fingers tracing the outline of a tarnished brass handle. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passage. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The passage led to a small, circular room. The walls were lined with shelves, overflowing with dusty books and jars filled with strange, unidentifiable specimens. Dried leaves, gnarled roots, and... were those insects? All suspended in murky liquids. This was Ilara's laboratory, her sanctuary. A wave of sadness washed over me. I wish I had known her. I ran my hand along the spine of a leather-bound book. The title was faded, almost illegible, but I could make out the words, Botanical Anomalies. I pulled it from the shelf, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. Inside, Ilara's handwriting filled the pages, a spidery script that danced across the lines. The early entries were filled with meticulous observations, detailed descriptions of plant species and their properties. But as I read on, the tone shifted. Her notes became more obsessive. She wrote of experiments, of crossbreeding plants in ways that seemed impossible, of coaxing life from things that should have been dead. Then I found the references to the root. The root is the key, she wrote. It is the source, the foundation upon which all life is built. But it is also something more, something other. The later entries grew increasingly frantic, filled with warnings and desperate pleas. The growth is spreading, she wrote. It hungers. What was she talking about? What was this growth? Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from outside. I jumped, startled, and slammed the book shut. Rain lashed against the glass roof of the conservatory, and the wind howled like a banshee. I needed to get back to the house. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell on a small, locked chest sitting on a table in the corner. I had to know what was inside. I searched the room, my fingers scrabbling through the clutter. I inserted it into the lock and turned. The chest clicked open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single object, a seed. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was large, almost the size of my fist, and covered in a network of veins that pulsed with a faint inner light. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. As I stared at it, a voice echoed in my mind, faint but unmistakable. "Plant me." I recoiled, dropping the seed back into the chest. My heart hammered in my chest. I stumbled back through the passage, bursting out into the conservatory. The storm had intensified. The wind roared through the glass panes, rattling them in their frames. Something earthy and fecund, like the smell of freshly turned soil. I ran, pushing my way through the dense foliage. As I reached the door to the conservatory, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A vine, thick as my arm, was snaking its way across the floor, reaching out towards me. Its surface was covered in tiny, hair-like tendrils that writhed and pulsed. It was moving fast. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking. I backed away, my eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. There was none. The storm raged outside, and the conservatory was filled with the sound of cracking glass and the rustling of leaves. The vine was still there on the other side of the door, waiting. I recoiled, dropping the seed back into the chest. The storm had intensified. The shadows danced wildly, whipped into grotesque shapes by the thrashing branches outside. I didn't stop, didn't even glance at the botanical monstrosities. My only thought was escape, or at least a return to the illusion of safety the main house offered. I sprinted through the long, echoing corridors, the floorboards groaning under my feet. The air felt heavy, like a sodden blanket. I could almost taste the damp earth, a rich fungal aroma that clung to the very walls. My breath hitched in my throat, not just from exertion, but from a cold, creeping certainty that I wasn't alone. No signal. Of course, this place was a dead zone, geographically isolated and seemingly cut off by design. I tried the landline, a bulky, antique rotary phone that sat on a small, claw-footed table. The dial tone was a flat, persistent hum, but when I tried to dial, the line went dead. I tried again and again, but nothing. The house was actively severing my connection, pulling me deeper into its suffocating embrace. A book slid off a shelf in the library, landing with a soft thud. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. There was no draft, no vibration to explain it. The air was still. It felt deliberate. I moved to the nearest window, peering out into the maelstrom. My own reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. But something was off. Behind my shoulder, in the reflected pane, a shape flickered. It wasn't there when I turned my head, just the empty, rain-streaked wall. But when I looked back at the reflection, it was there again. A fleeting, ominous presence, just at the edge of my peripheral vision, just beyond my grasp. I heard a faint scraping sound from the hallway, a slow, deliberate drag across the wooden floor. I knew I wasn't imagining it this time. It wasn't the wind, not a settling house. This was distinct, measured. I pressed myself against the wall, straining my ears, my breath held captive in my chest. The scraping stopped. Then, a low creak, like a heavy door slowly closing somewhere deeper in the house. My eyes fell on the old map of the estate I'd found earlier. Maybe, just maybe, its elevation would offer a clearer signal, a brief window to the outside. It was a desperate thought, born of escalating fear, but it was a thought. Pushing through the heavy oak front door, the storm hit me with full force. The wind was a physical entity, clawing at my clothes, whipping my hair across my face. I pulled my jacket tighter, hunching against the assault, and set off towards the distant, crumbling silhouette of the tower. Each step was a battle against the gale, the mud sucking at my boots. The path was overgrown, brambles tearing at my trousers. As I neared the tower, its skeletal frame loomed against the bruised sky. The stone was blackened with age and neglect, patches of ivy clinging like grasping fingers. The storm howled through its empty window frames, a mournful, drawn-out cry that sounded eerily like a human lament. I pushed open the heavy, rusted iron door, which groaned in protest, and stepped inside. A narrow, spiral staircase, also made of iron, twisted precariously upwards, its steps coated in a slick layer of moss. The wind was even more ferocious up here, funneling through the breaches in the stone. The tower swayed, or perhaps it was just my own vertigo, my mind playing tricks. At the top, the small, exposed platform offered no shelter. The wind tore at me, threatening to rip me from my feet. I pulled out my phone again, holding it high, hoping against hope. Still no signal, just the empty bars, mocking my desperation. In the distance, through a momentary break in the driving rain, I could just make out Blackwood Manor. From this vantage, it looked less like a house and more like an organism. The entire structure seemed to heave, its lines blurring, its very form shifting in the storm's embrace. And as I watched, transfixed by the grotesque vision, I felt it again. That omnipresent, malevolent gaze, not just from the manor, but from something within it, something that had been roused, something that now knew exactly where I was. The house wasn't just closing in. It was watching me, waiting. And I was completely, utterly alone. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. Wind howled, a mournful cry that vibrated through the vast panes of glass, rattling them in their frames. The shadows, already deep, danced like hungry things, reaching and retreating with every flicker of lightning. I practically fled, my breath catching in my throat as I burst through the heavy door, leaving the humid, plant-choked air behind. I locked the conservatory door, not that a simple bolt would stop whatever felt like it was growing inside. That night, sleep was a battleground. My dreams were not dreams, but vivid, visceral replays of the conservatory. I was trapped amidst colossal, fleshy leaves that pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. I saw the seed again, not in the chest, but floating, suspended in the air before me, glowing with an internal fire. The next few days blurred into a haze of restless nights and unnerving days. The dreams persisted, growing more intense, more demanding. And then, they started to bleed into my waking hours. It began subtly. A strange, earthy smell that would suddenly permeate a room, only to vanish moments later. I'd catch myself staring blankly at a wall, convinced I saw faint pulsing veins beneath the plaster, or heard a low, throbbing sound that was just beneath the threshold of hearing. I started avoiding mirrors. My reflection looked gaunt, eyes wide and bloodshot, a stranger staring back with an unsettling intensity. But the rationalizations felt thin, transparent, easily pierced by the growing unease. The house itself seemed to breathe around me. The creaks and groans of settling timber no longer sounded like an old house. They sounded like sighs, like groans. I felt a growing pull, a persistent, insidious urge to return to the conservatory. It wasn't curiosity anymore, or even the need to understand. It was a compulsion, a magnetic force dragging me towards the heart of the manor's peculiar flora. One afternoon, during a particularly violent storm that lashed against the manor, I found myself drawn, almost against my will, back to the conservatory. The wind howled outside, a beast trying to tear the manor apart, and the rain hammered against the glass with furious insistence. My heart was a frantic bird in my chest, but my feet kept moving. The air inside was thick and humid, a living thing. I moved through the dense foliage, the massive leaves brushing against my face, slick and cool. They seemed to writhe, their surfaces shimmering with an internal moisture. Tucked beneath a broad, leathery leaf, nestled in a tangle of roots that snaked over an ancient stone planter, was a small, spherical object. It glowed, not brightly, not like a lamp, but with a soft, ethereal luminescence. A deep, pulsating violet that seemed to draw all light into itself and then release it in tiny, rhythmic bursts. It was about the size of a marble, its surface smooth and slightly moist. This was no ordinary spore. This was a living jewel, and it pulsed with an undeniable alien energy. A strange warmth spread through me as I stared at it, a bizarre comfort that was utterly unsettling. The compulsion, which had been a low thrum, intensified, becoming a powerful, undeniable craving. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers brushing against its cool, damp surface. It felt alive, radiating a subtle vibration that resonated with something deep inside me. I wanted it, not just to examine it, not just to understand it, but to possess it, to keep it close. The thought was immediate, intrusive, and felt utterly wrong, yet undeniably powerful. My fingers closed around the spore, its soft glow a faint pulse in my palm. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest within me. The wind shrieked, and a sudden violent gust rattled the conservatory glass so hard I thought it would shatter. I stumbled back, clutching the spore, my mind a jumble of fear and an almost ecstatic sense of discovery. I looked around, my gaze unfocused, searching for an escape from the suffocating presence of the plants, from the weight of the manor's influence. Through the rain-streaked glass, a break in the trees, I saw it. Its ancient stone was black with damp, its broken battlements silhouetted against the bruised, churning sky. Lightning flashed, stark white, illuminating its crumbling structure for a split second. And in that brief, electric moment, I thought I saw something moving within its highest window. A vague shape, indistinct and menacing. My grip tightened around the spore, my knuckles white. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, echoing the storm's ferocity. I snatched the stack of Alara's journals from the dusty table, clutching them to my chest like a shield. I needed distance, a place to process what I'd found, what I'd felt. My gaze drifted towards the estate's perimeter, where a skeletal silhouette pierced the stormy sky. It was isolated, exposed to the elements. Yes, but perhaps that very exposure meant it was less entwined with the manor's oppressive pulse. Battling the wind and the lashing rain, I fought my way across the overgrown grounds. The old tower's iron-bound door groaned on rusted hinges, protesting my intrusion. A narrow, spiraling staircase slick with moisture led upwards. Near the top, a small, grimy window offered a sliver of weak, storm-filtered light. It was enough. I settled onto a precarious stone ledge, the journals heavy on my lap. My fingers, still tingling from the seed's touch, fumbled with the brittle pages of the first journal. Alara's early entries were precise, almost lyrical, detailing botanical observations with a passion that was infectious. She cataloged species, noted growth patterns, and sketched delicate flora with an artist's eye. But as I flipped through the years, the handwriting became less neat, the observations more abstract, and the tone subtly shifted. The date was almost 50 years ago. Not sound, precisely, but a resonance. A thought, perhaps? They respond to my touch. A vibration in the soil, a hum in the leaves. My brow furrowed. Resonance? I skipped ahead, drawn by the increasing urgency in her script. They are hungry, not for light, not for water, but for something else. A richness I cannot provide with mere compost. They demand more. The manor's pulse. I remembered the subtle vibrations I'd felt, the way the house seemed to sigh around me. Alara wasn't just imagining it. He was experiencing it. The next few pages were a frantic jumble of theories, crossouts, and increasingly bizarre diagrams that looked less like botanical studies and more like occult symbols. A small offering at first, a squirrel, a bird. The growth was immediate, vibrant. They pulsed with gratitude. But the hunger, it is insatiable. It grows with each offering, and the manor, it feels more alive. My breath hitched. Blood, the strange, rich scent I'd sometimes caught in the house, the vibrant, unnatural life of some of the growths. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. She'd been cultivating an appetite. I turned another page, my fingers trembling. They speak of a host, a new vessel for the manor's awareness, a way to spread beyond these walls. I have become part of the network, a conduit, but I am old, my roots shallow. They need someone stronger, someone who can truly listen. The words blurred. My eyes darted to the single massive seed I'd found in the chest, then to the dense, writhing growths outside the conservatory, their tendrils reaching, always reaching. A new host. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. Alara had been consumed, not just by her obsession, but by the very plants she tended. And now I was here, the inheritor, the new tenant, the new host. The wind howled louder, a banshee's shriek. I wasn't just in a house. I was in a living, breathing entity, and it had been waiting for me. The words still swam before my eyes. A new host. It wasn't just Alara's death. It was her consumption. The realization had settled in my gut like a stone, heavy and cold. The sprawling growths outside the conservatory, their tendrils like grasping fingers, suddenly made horrifying sense. They weren't just plants. They were extensions. And I, Blake, was now in their house, their body. I shoved the journal aside, determination hardening my jaw. Fear was a bitter taste, but ignorance was worse. If Blackwood Manor was alive, if it truly hungered, then I needed to understand its anatomy, its heart. Ilara's journals, filled with cryptic notes and botanical sketches, were my only map. I spent hours poring over them, ignoring the rumble of distant thunder that was beginning to echo through the old house. The storm was gathering, a fitting backdrop to the storm brewing inside me. I found it eventually, a faded, water-stained sketch tucked between pages describing fungal spores and root systems. It wasn't a map, not exactly, but a diagram of something beneath the manor, a crude cross-section with an arrow pointing to a series of interlocking circles. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, and I glanced out. Lightning forked in the distance, briefly illuminating its crumbling stone and the vines that clung to it like skeletal veins. With a powerful surge of resolve, I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight and a crowbar. The air in the manor felt thick, expectant. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the ancient timbers, seemed to hold a whispered warning. I made my way through the labyrinthine corridors, the sound of the storm outside growing louder, a constant low roar that vibrated through the very foundations of the house. The tower was on the far western edge of the estate, a place I'd barely explored. Reaching the base of the tower, the wind howled around me, snatching at my clothes. Rain streamed down the moss-covered stones, turning the ground to slick mud. I found a small, iron-bound door, almost entirely swallowed by the overgrowth of ivy and stubborn, gnarled roots. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades, perhaps centuries. The crowbar scraped against the rusty hinges, a screech that seemed to pierce the din of the storm. With a final, desperate heave, the door groaned inward, revealing a gaping blackness. The passage sloped steeply downwards, the rough-hewn steps slick with moisture. The further I descended, the more the air changed. It became heavy, humid, pressing against my skin. The earthy scent intensified, now overlaid with a subtle, pulsating musk. The walls, initially stone, began to transition. The sound of the storm faded, replaced by a low, resonant thrumming that seemed to come from the very ground beneath my feet. The roots weren't just clinging to the walls, they were becoming the walls. Their surfaces pulsed faintly, a slow, rhythmic contraction and expansion that made my stomach churn. The passage opened into a vast, cavernous space. My flashlight beam was too weak to illuminate its full extent, but it revealed a terrifying panorama. This wasn't a cellar or a forgotten bunker. This was a subterranean cathedral, not built by human hands, but grown. They branched and twisted, forming arches and columns, their surfaces covered in a glistening, viscous slime. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was organic, vital. The air was thick with a strange fungal musk, so potent it tasted metallic on my tongue. Everywhere I looked, there was movement. A slow, almost imperceptible undulation of the roots, a faint shimmer on the fungal caps. This wasn't just a network. It was a single, monstrous organism. The roots, the fungi, the very air itself, it all felt connected, part of a vast living system. And then, the horrifying truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just under Blackwood Manor. This was Blackwood Manor. The house above, the gardens, Ilara's experiments, they were all just extensions of this titanic subterranean heart. It wasn't just consuming the estate, it was the estate. And I had just walked into its core. The revelation, a new host, had torn a hole in my understanding of Ilara's death, leaving me hollowed out and exposed. My great-aunt wasn't just gone. He had been absorbed. The thought was a clawed thing, raking at the inside of my skull. It wasn't a sickness that took her, but a hunger, a living sacrifice. And the manor, this grand, decaying monument, was its maw, to breathe. The storm had begun to howl in earnest, a furious, wind-whipped deluge that slapped against the ancient glass of the manor. It felt right somehow, a mirroring of the tempest churning within me. I grabbed a heavy oilskin coat from a hook near the kitchen, its fabric stiff and smelling of old rain and mildew, and shoved my feet into mud-caked boots. I needed perspective, a place where the manor's oppressive presence might be diluted, if only by the raw power of the elements. It stood on the furthest edge of the estate's overgrown perimeter, a crumbling sentinel against the relentless Pacific Northwest weather. I remembered seeing it on my initial explorations, a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at the sky. Now it called to me like a forgotten promise. The trek through the lashing rain was brutal. Branches, heavy with water and old moss, swiped at my face. My boots sank into the saturated earth with each step, the sucking mud fighting for purchase. The wooden door, hanging precariously on a single rusted hinge, groaned in the wind, sounding like a dying animal. I pushed it open, the effort sending a shower of rotten splinters to the muddy ground. I climbed the spiraling stone staircase, each step a testament to time's relentless march. The spiral was tight, claustrophobic, and the only light came from the occasional crack in the wall, revealing the furious gray outside. The wind whistled through gaps in the masonry, a high, thin keen that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I reached the top, a small circular room open to the elements, though a crumbling overhang offered some meager shelter. Ilara wasn't just a victim, he was a part of it, and I was next. That's when it started. The tower, the storm, the whole world began to warp. They spoke of growth, of roots, of deep, nourishing earth. Then, the visions. They weren't like dreams, or even memories. They were overlaid onto my reality, transparent yet utterly vivid. The sound of the car crash, a screech of metal and glass, morphed into the groaning of ancient timbers, the cracking of stone, the slow, agonizing sound of the manor shifting, settling, breathing. I saw Ilara, not as the frail woman I remembered, but as a figure wreathed in green, her eyes wide and unseeing, her skin like bark, her hair like twisting vines. He was smiling, a serene, terrifying smile as the tendrils embraced her, drew her in, made her one with the very ground. And in that vision, I saw myself, standing where she stood, the same embrace reaching for me, beckoning. My great loss, the tragedy that had driven me to Blackwood Manor in the first place, became inextricably linked with the horrors around me. The manor didn't just reflect my pain. It fed on it, nurtured it, made it bloom into something monstrous. My sorrow wasn't just mine anymore. It was part of its ecosystem. It wasn't my heart. It was deeper, more fundamental. It was a pulse, a slow, powerful beat that felt like the earth itself. And with it came a sense of understanding, of connection, a horrifying, insidious belonging. The root. The words weren't spoken, but they bloomed in my mind, a clear, undeniable truth. I wasn't just seeing the manor's influence, I was feeling it. It was reaching into me, finding purchase in the raw wounds of my past, weaving itself into my very being. It was a comforting warmth, a promise of peace, of an end to the struggle. And it was the most terrifying thing I had ever encountered. It felt right. And that was the problem. That was the erosion. This insidious pull, this growing connection to the root, threatened to consume me entirely. It offered solace, a cessation of pain, if only I would surrender. My determination, which had felt so strong only moments ago, wavered under the weight of this seductive, monstrous invitation. I was fighting not just a physical threat, but a war for my own mind, my own self. The storm outside might rage, but the true battle was just beginning, deep within me. The soft, insidious warmth that had settled in me, the one that promised a strange, quiet peace, felt different now. It was no longer a comfort. It was an invasion. It wasn't offering solace. It was seeking purchase, like a parasitic root finding purchase in fertile soil. It wanted to consume my grief, not alleviate it. A cold dread, sharper than any fear I'd felt before, sliced through the artificial calm. This wasn't an escape. It was a deeper trap. And now, it wanted me. I couldn't let that happen. A storm had rolled in, a Pacific Northwest tempest that seemed to mirror the turmoil in my skull. It felt right somehow. This was no quiet, contemplative battle. This was a war. My hand closed around the cool, scarred wood of an old axe handle I'd found in the tool shed. It was heavy, rusted in places, but the blade still held a dangerous edge. I wasn't thinking clearly, not really. Logic had been replaced by a primal, desperate surge of defiance. Ilara used to spend hours up there. I remembered an old photograph, her silhouette against the sky. It was a high point, a vantage. Maybe it was a nerve ending for the manor, a conduit for its influence. If I could strike at it there, perhaps I could sever something vital. The wind nearly tore the axe from my grip as I stumbled out into the torrential downpour. The ground was slick with mud, and the air tasted of wet earth and bruised pine. The tower loomed, skeletal and menacing, its ancient stones weeping rainwater. Each step was a battle against the elements, a physical manifestation of the fight within me. The entrance to the tower was a gaping maw, swallowed by clinging ivy. Inside, the air was thick, humid, and heavy with a cloying sweetness that was almost intoxicating. I climbed, my breath rasping in my throat, the axe a cold weight in my hand. Higher and higher I went, the storm's roar intensifying with each flight. Through the broken arrow slits, I could glimpse the churning gray of the sky, the wind a physical force against the ancient stones. And then, I reached the top chamber. It wasn't just old stone and crumbling wood here. This chamber was the heart of something grotesque. Thick, pulsating growths, like swollen veins, snaked up the walls, across the ceiling, and down into the floorboards. They were a sickly greenish brown, some as thick as my thigh, others delicate as spiderwebs, all interwoven into a single, vast, organic tapestry. They pulsed, a slow, rhythmic throb, and a faint phosphorescent glow emanated from their surfaces, casting the chamber in an eerie, unearthly light. This wasn't just an overgrown room. It was a living, breathing organ, a control center. A tremor ran through the stone floor. Stop. Peace. Embrace. No, I growled, the word ripped from my throat by the wind. I hefted the axe. This was it. This was where I fought back. I swung, aiming for the largest, thickest growth, a gnarled mass that seemed to anchor the entire network. The blade bit deep, a sickening thwack echoing in the small chamber. A thick, viscous sap, the color of bruised plums, oozed from the wound, steaming slightly and filling the air with a putrid metallic scent. The entire tower screamed. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears, but a shriek that tore through my mind, raw and agonizing. The growths on the walls writhed, their tendrils lashing out like angry whips. The floorboards beneath me bucked and shifted, trying to throw me off balance. Mine. You are mine. You will belong. Through the storm-lashed gaps where windows once were, I saw them. Faces. My family. My past. The manor was weaponizing my grief, twisting my memories into daggers. "Get out of my head!" I yelled, bringing the axe down again, hacking blindly at the pulsating mass. Another gash, more putrid sap. The air grew heavy, suffocating. As the blade tore through another layer of the thick, fibrous tissue, something glinted within the wound. Something metallic. I paused, my breath ragged, my eyes fixed on the object. I hacked once more, carefully, pulling back the fleshy growth. There, embedded deep within the living wall, was a tarnished silver locket. It was old, intricately carved, and utterly unmistakable. I'd seen it in an old photograph clutched in Alara's hand, a ghost of a smile on her lips. It was hers. It wasn't just a plant entity, it was Alara, or what was left of her, fused, absorbed. The manor wasn't just a root system, it was a living monument to her ultimate grotesque communion. I wasn't just fighting an entity, I was fighting her. Her will, her obsession, her final twisted legacy. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, pressing in on me. A massive vine, thick as a python, erupted from the wall beside me, moving with terrifying speed. Before I could react, it lashed out, wrapping around my left leg with crushing force. I cried out, the pain sharp and immediate. I tried to bring the axe down, but the vine tightened, pulling me off balance. My foot slipped on the wet stone. I fell hard, my head striking the crumbling wall with a sickening crack. White lights exploded behind my eyes, and the axe clattered from my numb fingers, sliding across the damp floor. I lay there, dazed, the vine constricting my leg, the pain a searing fire. Rest, join us, become. I was trapped, injured, and the promise of peace had never felt more like a death sentence. "Get out of my head!" I yelled, the words torn from my throat and swallowed by the storm. The faces, my family, their eyes like burnt-out embers, their mouths stretched in silent agony, flickered at the edges of my vision, mocking my grief, weaponizing every loss. My chest heaved, a raw, burning knot of terror and fury twisting inside me. This place, this thing, it wasn't just trying to kill me. It was trying to dismantle me, piece by agonizing piece. The cold shock of it momentarily cleared the spectral images. The wind howled, a banshee's shriek that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the manor. A foolish, desperate thought sparked in my mind. Alara had always kept odd things in odd places. A clue, an answer, or perhaps the manor was simply herding me, like a shepherd to the slaughter. I didn't care. Any direction was better than standing here, letting my mind be picked apart. The wind shoved at me, a physical force threatening to rip me from my feet. Rain stung my face, blurring my vision, turning the overgrown path into a slick, treacherous morass. Twisted branches, heavy with moisture, clawed at my clothes, their skeletal fingers snagging and tearing. I could feel the manor's gaze on my back, a palpable weight that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. The air smelled of wet earth, decaying leaves, and something else. a deep, musky sweetness that was both cloying and faintly metallic. Finally, I reached the base of the tower. It stood like a broken tooth against the churning sky, its stonework eroded, patches of ivy clinging precariously. Inside, the air was heavy, damp, and still. I stepped over a threshold littered with fallen masonry and damp skeletal leaves. The interior was a circular shell, remarkably intact despite the exterior decay. Light filtered weakly from high, narrow slits that once served as arrow loops, now just jagged openings through which the storm's breath sighed. The space was eerily silent save for the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere above and the distant roar of the storm. My eyes adjusted slowly to the gloom. The air felt thick, charged, like before a lightning strike. I scanned the rough-hewn stone walls, looking for anything out of place. There, tucked into a niche that had once held a torch sconce, half hidden by a fallen chunk of ceiling plaster, was a small, leather-bound volume. It was waterlogged and swollen, its pages warped, but unmistakably a journal. Ilara's. I flipped through the ruined pages, many of them illegible, until I found what appeared to be the last entry, written in a spidery, almost frantic hand. The choice is made. Not a surrender, no. A communion. The root demands sustenance, a consciousness to guide its bloom. My life, my essence, woven into its tapestry. The others, they resisted. They withered. But I understood. There is no escape, only transformation. To become one is to truly live, to spread, to encompass. My gardens will be vast, my reach infinite. The ritual is simple, an offering of self, a merging of spirit and root flesh. The heart, the core of the self, given freely. Only then will the bloom truly begin. Only then will the hunger be sated momentarily. And then, the next host will arrive. The next seed will be planted. My successor. The cycle continues. My Blake, you will understand. Ilara hadn't been a victim, not entirely. He had been a willing participant, a mad gardener cultivating her own demise, her own grotesque ascension. She hadn't been trapped. He had chosen to become part of the very thing that consumed Blackwood Manor. And now, the journal, found in this desolate, forgotten tower, made it horrifyingly clear. The manor demanded the same of me. My Blake, you will understand. You will choose. The root wasn't just a plant. It was a consciousness, an ancient consuming entity that had swallowed Ilara whole, integrating her into its sprawling subterranean network. It wanted me to be the next, to offer myself, to guide its growth, to become a part of its monstrous living architecture. The choice hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Or find a final desperate means of escape, knowing that Ilara, in her madness, had believed there was none. The storm outside raged, a mirror to the tempest brewing within me. My breath hitched, a cold, hard knot forming in my gut. Ilara hadn't been a victim, not entirely. The thought twisted inside me, a barb of ice. It wasn't just a parasitic horror. It was a hungry god, offering a twisted form of communion. I stumbled back, away from the pulsating heart of the root, the thrumming, organic mass that had once been my great-aunt. The air in the manor was thick with the scent of loam and something metallic, like ancient blood. My lungs burned. I had to get out. But where? The main exits were likely choked, the manor itself a living cage. It stood at the estate's highest point, a relic from an older era mostly ignored, probably crumbling. But it was outside the main house, a separate structure. And maybe, just maybe, it offered a vantage point, a way to understand, or even escape. Rain lashed against the leaded panes as I scrambled through a hidden servant's passage, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The storm had broken, a furious tempest tearing through the ancient trees. I pushed through a heavy, warped door, stepping out into the maelstrom. The wind hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Rain hammered down, instantly drenching me to the bone, plastering my hair to my face. Mud sucked at my boots with every desperate step. It looked even worse up close, a cylindrical stone structure overgrown with ivy, its battlements crumbling, a gaping hole where a window should have been. But it was my only hope. I fought against the wind, my muscles screaming, the slick, uneven path threatening to send me sprawling. The root's influence felt thinner out here, though still present, a faint, persistent hum beneath the storm's fury. As I reached the base of the tower, a tremor ran through the ground, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated up through my feet. The manor wasn't just breathing, it was straining. The heavy iron door to the tower was rusted shut, but the storm's relentless assault had already done half the work. I put my shoulder to it, grunting with effort, and with a shriek of tortured metal it gave way, peeling inwards. Darkness, thick and absolute, greeted me. The climb was arduous, the steps slick with condensation, some cracked and unstable. The wind found every fissure whistling mournfully. As I ascended, the sweet, cloying scent grew stronger, mixed with a faint, earthy musk. I reached the top, pushing through a rotted wooden door that led to the observation deck. The storm raged outside the open embrasure, rain spraying inwards. The wind shrieked, threatening to tear the very stones from their mortar. But my eyes were drawn not to the furious sky, but to what lay in the center of the small circular room. On it, a collection of Alara's field notes bound in decaying leather lay open. And beside them, a small, intricate carving of a root system, made from what looked like petrified wood. It was old, impossibly old. My gaze fell to the open journal. Alara's precise, elegant script filled the pages, but the words were a descent into madness, or perhaps a terrifying clarity. It is the ultimate communion, the shared consciousness of all that has been and all that will be. My ancestors, the land itself, they are all here within its embrace. I do not die. I simply expand. A wave of nausea hit me. This was the revealed discovery. Alara hadn't just been absorbed. He had willingly joined, believing it was an ascension, a form of collective immortality. Her notes detailed her experiments, her careful cultivation of the root, not to destroy it, but to perfect it, to make it ready for me. Then I saw it, scrawled in a shaky hand on the last page, almost illegible. The seed is planted. The new growth awaits its host. He will come. He always comes. The tower is the threshold, the point of choice. Join us, Blake. The sweet, earthy scent was overpowering now, and I realized it wasn't just decay. It was life. A profound alien vitality emanating from the growths on the walls, from the very stones beneath my feet. They pulsed faintly, a slow, organic rhythm that synced with the thrumming I'd felt from the manor. The event was upon me. This wasn't just a place of refuge. It was the final proving ground. The storm outside seemed to mock my futile struggle, its ferocity a mirror of the battle raging within me. Join us. Become whole. I closed my eyes, fighting against the insidious pull. Alara's words echoed. The seed is planted. The new growth awaits its host. Was the seed already within me? Had it been there since I first set foot on this cursed estate? The horror wasn't just outside. It was already burrowing deep, seeking purchase. I opened my eyes, determined. I would not become a gardener for this thing. With a roar that was lost to the storm, I seized the heavy, petrified wood carving from the altar. It felt warm, almost alive in my hands. This was a symbol of its power, a focal point. I would not destroy the root. I knew that now. It was too vast, too ancient. But I could refuse. I could sever my personal connection, even if it was a temporary reprieve. This was a piece of it, a conduit, and if I couldn't escape, I would at least fight to remain me. I slammed the carving down with all my strength, not against the altar, but against the gaping hole in the stone embrasure, the place where the tower was most exposed to the raging elements. The petrified wood splintered, cracking with a sound like dry bones, and a faint shimmering web of organic light, like phosphorescent roots, flared across its surface before vanishing. A searing pain lanced through my head, a sharp, violent wrench. I gasped, falling to my knees, clutching my temples. The storm outside continued its fury, indifferent. I was free, for now. But as I staggered to my feet, my head throbbing, a deep, unsettling awareness settled over me. The manor still stood, its ancient evil unbroken, waiting. I had escaped the tower, escaped the immediate choice, but the root had left its mark. I was irrevocably changed, a new kind of host, carrying a piece of its horror, a silent growing seed within me, waiting for the right conditions to sprout. Blackwood Manor had released me, but it had also claimed me, in a way far more subtle and terrifying than I could have ever imagined.